If they've touched a single hair on that girl's head, I will eviscerate the sons of bitches.
See? You do care, Miss Grimshaw.
Of course I care. About all of you fools.
Susan Grimshaw. There's a mixed bag of feelings and way that I look at her. From a gang perspective, she's said to be one of the originals, only behind Hosea and Dutch. It's debated whether if she joined before or after Arthur. I don't really feel confident saying her recruitment was one way or the other, but regardless, she's seen as the original 4 members of the Van der Linde gang, yet she doesn't really get the respect as the other 3 founders. Arthur, between Hosea and Dutch, does get more lip from other members such as Bill, who mocks how he can't do no wrong in Dutch's eyes, but even then, he's still the feared enforcer they all respect and listen to. Similar to Dutch, Hosea is the loving, respectable father, although Hosea has a softer touch that separates him from his counterpart. Miss Grimshaw does get a level of respect from the enforcers and even Dutch, but when it comes to the people she's supposed to look after, most notably the ones working directly underneath her, the women of the camp, it becomes a little bit of a different story. Karen has shared how she passionately dislikes her, and even Tilly's joked about killing her.
How are you?
Alive? And you?
Fine. Let me ask you a question. If I was to kill Miss Grimshaw, would Dutch be mad?
Miss Grimshaw? Well, Dutch has a soft spot for her.
These distasteful feelings towards Miss Grimshaw aren't exactly unwarranted, and nobody would be at fault for thinking Miss Grimshaw likewise doesn't care about them, but as I have shown in the beginning clip, she does. She may run the camp's upkeep like a strict boot camp, but it's not necessarily a reflection of her feelings towards the women she's looking after. It could actually be a mixture of a few other things. On the one hand, she could be trying to show a little bit of tough love. It's a cruel world, and these women could, in her eyes anyways, be easily taken advantage of. Especially if the men of the camp are out doing the more dangerous work, it'd be much easier for them to fall into a false sense of security, thinking they're safe or untouchable. On the other hand, this could fall a little bit more into the side of speculation, but her past relationship with Dutch is never really brought up or touched upon. During the game, Molly O'Shea is Dutch's primary love interest, but even she begins to get ignored and sidelined. At some point during Clement's point, Dutch is even brazen enough with straight up making advances towards Mary Beth in the center of camp.
There is something about you, Mary Beth. There really is.
Thank you.
Quite a lady she's becoming. Really, quite something.
With a cult of personality surrounding Dutch and everyone seemingly having such a high opinion of him, it makes me wonder if Miss Grimshaw experienced the pain and bitterness Molly experiences due to Dutch caring less and less for her. With Miss Grimshaw having a situation not only similar, but I would argue a little worse. Miss Grimshaw may have decided to devote herself into the camp's upkeep and proving she could be quite useful in this regard, doubling down on making sure there's food to eat, places to sleep, and clean clothes for the members to have, both as a way to ignore Dutch's new love interest, which would have been Annabelle, the woman Colm is said to have killed. Simultaneously, while ignoring Dutch, she could have been just pulling her weight around the camp, with those combinations being the explanation for her rigid nature. I don't think would be too far-fetched. Besides her unique original romantic involvement with Dutch, unlike some other gang members, she doesn't have much information on crimes she has been known to be involved in. She's obviously a stern woman who, during the kidnapping of Tilly, can be quite violent, so there's more than just being a glorified tough maid. When push comes to shove, she's no stranger to drawing blood. She's more than willing to take a life if need be. And on that note, she does care for everyone within the camp, as she said so herself. With her status of being an original member of the gang, inducted as one of the oldest standing members, her position of seniority or being directly responsible for the camp's women doesn't exactly signify her as a great leader though. Considering she was still alive and well involved with the gang during the time the robbery of the Saint-Denis Bank occurred, an event where, in the immediate aftermath, the Van der Linde gang wasn't just leaderless but left extremely vulnerable, Grimshaw may have been fine standing guard or defending Shady Belle, but she wasn't the one that took over finding a new area for the gang to relocate to evade the law that was undoubtedly coming for all of them. Instead of rising up in the absence of Arthur, Dutch, and Hosea, there's really nothing shared about what she did during that time, and you would think that would have been the prime opportunity for everything to just fall on her shoulders, and given her, let's say, abrasive nature, this would have been the time for her to basically tell everyone, pack up your shit, let's go. But instead, the leadership position was left for both Charles and Sadie, with most of that actually falling on Sadie's shoulders. She moved the entire gang over to LeKay Lake, and she even left a note behind for whoever returned to Shady Belle to be able to have some sort of trail to follow so they could reunite with the rest of the gang. Sadie and Charles were both newer members of the gang. Sadie was obviously picked up during the chapter of Coulter at the beginning of the game, while Charles was said to only be riding with them for about 6 months prior to the start of Red Dead Redemption 2. And yet Miss Grimshaw allowed them to be the temporary leaders. Perhaps she became so accustomed and familiar with being in charge of the inner workings of the camp, dictating activities once the camp was already up and established, instead of scouting and possibly fighting for a new hideout. Whatever the reason, it does feel like a giant missed opportunity in hindsight to make her more versatile than she is, which she really isn't. If she was displayed as being willing and capable of making critical decisions for the collective gang whenever Dutch, Hosea, and Arthur went present, would have not only been an incredible way to increase Miss Grimshaw's on-screen time, which is something that's already low, but it would have made the older days of the Vanderlyn gang much more spectacular. It would have been a phenomenal thing to see Rockstar go through this sequence of slowly watching every Vanderlyn gang member, the original ones anyways, decline, to rise up, be much more proactive, and then slowly get ripped apart. Clemens Point, for instance, we get to see Hosea at work, be much more proactive himself than ever before, doing his best at conning the Braithwaite family, the very thing he's known to do, his bread and butter. And then with his death, moving into Beaver Hollow would have had an even deeper layer of watching the original Vanderlyn gang crumble, if we had seen Miss Grimshaw be much more proactive in that chapter the way Hosea was during Clemens Point, with her leading her own missions, or if she was discovered as the person responsible for allowing the women to run off the way they did. Truly coming in a full circle. Miss Grimshaw, as Arthur did with John, could have tried to save the ones she cared for most, witnessing Dutch's descent into madness while still staying loyal to Dutch. It would have been incredible, especially when you listen to her. Besides Arthur, I would say John too, but he seems a little more conflicted on everything, but Miss Grimshaw to the very end still values loyalty. She's been with Dutch since day one, so she knows what the goal of the gang always was and the standards Dutch expected everyone within the gang to adhere to, their philosophy, their way of life, the people they can and can't rob. Her valuing loyalty isn't lost at the very end. There's even a moment during Beaver Hollow where she finally confronts Dutch, questioning what he's doing, a very rare moment where they're both visibly shaken.
To question me, I mean.
I have always been loyal, Dutch. And I shall go on being loyal, but what are we doing here? We need to move and keep moving.
We need money! You dumb fool! Money! Or we are dead! We are all dead!
And it's great, finally. Beyond the camp upkeep, in this moment, she does finally speak up to him. One other person that seemingly would actually get through to him. You would think besides Arthur. John is dead to Dutch as far as he's concerned right now. Arthur is delusional and dying, and Hosea was killed off a while ago, so at this point in time, the only person that could seemingly get through would have been Miss Grimshaw, but it ends up being largely ineffective. Dutch does question her loyalty, an accusation that would have been very identical to what Arthur was doing with the Wapitis, helping them as well as John, saving them from the destruction Dutch was dragging them all down into, which again would have been a giant missed opportunity, with Miss Grimshaw doing the exact same thing with the women of the camp. And then with Arthur knowing full well the hell that Dutch was descending into, and yet he still stuck by his side, Miss Grimshaw doing the same would have really drove that cult of personality of Dutch home. This is what remains of the founding members of the Vanderlyn gang, and that Robin Hood philosophy, the idea of stealing from the rich and giving to the poor, are long gone. They can't really help anyone besides, well, not even themselves at this point, but at least they can save as many people as they possibly could, while continuing to value loyalty above all else. bringing an entirely different meaning to loyalty. It really would have been the blind loyalty Arthur's noted of having his entire life, this time with no delusion of what they're loyal to and why. But instead of further exploring Miss Grimshaw, adding to an effective fall of the Vanderlyn gang, a disintegration that would have spectacularly destroyed the myth of the Notorious Vanderlyn gang by way of building up the characters and then through Dutch's increasing loss of reality betraying them, we're just giving Micah outright shooting Miss Grimshaw without Dutch batting an eye. It's tragic and is enough to show Dutch's descent into madness, but without more being done by Miss Grimshaw, I think many people unfairly put her in the same category as Pearson, just because they're both responsible for the gang's camp being looked after. I don't want to downplay her death, but at the same time, it's hard to not imagine how much more her story and players' attachments could have grown with just a mission or two, or even some skillful dialogue placed at the right moments. I'm going to pass this on to you. How do you feel about Miss Grimshaw's position within the game and how she's betrayed? Do you think her getting a mission or two, showing her secretly getting the women out of the camp to save from Dutch's horrible plans, or instead some audio of her flipping out about their desertion, would just mean there's too much going on during the events of Beaver Hollow, or do you think that that little bit would go a long way? Let me know what you think down in the comments section below, and like always, thank you so much for watching, and subscribe for some more Red Dead content. But like always, my name is Cynic, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.